Hi, I'm Beth from Restyle Pieces Boutique. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to be working on a vintage buffet. I love the details on it. Wasn't so sure if I loved the details on the doors because it was different colors and it just looked kind of off to me. But I'm going to try to make this vintage buffet into something classic and beautiful. So if you want to watch this makeover, stay tuned. So I'm starting here with a pretty thick card because I knew these doors didn't shut exactly right. They were rubbing a little bit. So what I do is I just stick a card in there, and if it moves nicely and gently like there at the bottom, it's fine. But when it gets stuck, that's where I know it's rubbing and I can sand there. So I'm just trying to, first of all, make sure all the screws in the hinges are tightened, so that maybe that's what's making it rub, and it wasn't. So I got out my 80 grit on my Surf Prep sander and I just kept sanding those places up in the left corner where I knew it was rubbing, so that, and running my card through there so that I can make sure it's smooth and it's closing and opening well. Success on the right side. Now I'm going to go to the left side and make sure it wasn't really rubbing that I could remember or that I think that I could tell, but I stuck my card through and went through a few little places and it was just fine. So taking the drawers out right now, and I noticed it had some stoppers that keep the drawers from going too far in that needed replaced. I had different heights of stoppers to see, make sure they didn't rub when I was putting those stoppers in. So just making sure the drawers work. This is one of the thicker stoppers that I put in the top to see if it would go in and close, because it seemed like it was just kind of flopping a little bit. So now that all those are functional and work very well, I can get on with the process that I always go through. And the first thing I'm going to do is take off all this hardware. I'm planning on keeping the hardware. I think it will look really good if it's all cleaned up and gold, and it will look really good if I have all this piece on the body one color, and the hardware will go well with that color that I'm thinking. So I vacuum out my piece, and then I clean it with my Pure Power from Farmhouse Paint. It is a de-waxer, degreaser, gets all the dirt, grime, and everything off of the piece so that you won't grind it in when you do your scuff sanding or sand to bare wood. I use a microfiber cloth to clean on the bigger open places, but all these details, I also use a brush. So you'll notice I got out that little tiny brush, brushed it off, and then wiped it. So here I'm scraping off the finish on the top with a carbide scraper because it is super thick and shiny. And yeah, it's just gonna take a long time to get this finish off. And I was wondering if even this scraper was gonna do the job. I started with my sander, and I started with, I think it was 80 or 120, and it was coming off, but not near well enough. There was lots of layers left. So I got out my clean stripper. I don't like to strip at all, but I knew this was the only way I was gonna get all this finish off quickly. So I just made sure I get all my PPEs, my gloves, my goggles, my respirator, leave that on for 15 minutes, and I scrape it off and then clean up with water. Look at how all that goo is coming up and being dissolved. And this is completely the most satisfying part of it. So I just put a little Walmart bag or Target bag inside my trash can, and I just scrape that goo right inside. I used a wire brush scraper around the edges to get all of the goo off the edges and all of the stripper off there. I wasn't sure if this wood was going to work out because it looked like it was going to be a lot different than the top. So I might be painting the edges of this, but that's okay. It'll look really good either way. So here I'm taking my water and I'm just rinsing off all of the goo, wiping that off with a cloth. I like to put plastic down below because it is kind of a messy job, or maybe I'm just messy, extra messy, because water and stripper and things go flying on the floor. So I let it dry, and here I've already been working on sanding. All I have is this area left in the middle. I am sanding with my 120 and then I go to my 180. At this angle, you can see on the edge all those different kinds of wood, and so I will be painting those edges and just either staining or whitewashing the top. We'll see. So here I have some pieces that I have filled the little dents and dings, and I'm just scuff sanding the whole entire piece, which means roughing up that wood so that my paint will stick to it. I wiped it off with a cloth, and now I'm taping up my drawers. So here I'm using Scotch tape plus plastic, and I'm just taping up my drawers so that I don't get any overspray on them. I like to spray when the drawer is flush with the frame of the piece. I like to spray my pieces with the drawers in. So now this top, I didn't like the yellowish orange color on the top of the piece still. There's still more to do to the top, so I decided to bleach it. So I'm using Zinsser wood bleach. It's a 2-part kit. It comes with part A and part B. So you spread part A on with a brush or a chip brush or a foam brush is what I'm using here. And then you let it sit for 5 to 7 minutes, depending on if it's a hardwood or a softwood. And the directions on the package will tell you how long. I can't remember. I think it's like 5 to 7 minutes. Anyway, so I've used all that. You can see all the brown grossness in there. It's already starting to work. Let that sit, and then I come back and I use part B. I apply part B, and then I let it dry overnight. After this dries overnight, then I neutralize it with half vinegar and half water. I didn't have a film of me doing that, but I spray it with half vinegar water mixture, and then I wipe that up, let it dry completely before I do a final 220 sanding. So I've done my sanding, and it looks a lot lighter, but I want to do a paint wash just to give it some dimension and take a little bit more of that yellow and orange out. So I'm using Safari Jacket by Wise Owl Paint. Has a little bit of green tint, which will counteract with those orange and yellow tones. So I'm just spreading one section at a time, painting that paint wash on. I use about like a 7-to-1 mixture, one part paint, 7 parts water, or sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. I don't measure that carefully. And then I just do one section at a time, let it sit for just a second, and then I wipe it back. And here I'm unfolding and refolding my blue shop towel so that I get a nice clean part of the towel, and so I won't have a bunch of paint on my towel that I'm just spreading around. When you're finished and the paint wash is drying, don't fret. It may not look exactly like it's going to as it's drying, but when it's dry, you'll be much happier with it. I let it dry overnight, gave it a really light sand with a very high grit, and then I'm top coating it. So here I'm deciding, okay, I want to top coat it. I love the color it is, but top coat always changes your shade a little bit. And so I'm trying to decide after I top coat, do I just want to do a few coats of top coat and be done with the top? Or do I need a little more color? And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, it's still a little bit yellow and orange, and it's a little bit lighter than I wanted it to be. I want a little bit of warmth, a little bit of brown. So I'm going to use some Glaze Effects by General Finishes Van Dyke Brown Glaze. So I'm putting a little bit of extender in it, which because it's water-based, it dries fairly quickly. So this little tablespoon of extender will help it slow down the drying process so I'll have time to work. So I just apply this exactly like I did the paint wash. I spread it on, I wipe it off. And because I had a little extra work time with that extender, meaning that it wasn't going to dry on me before I got it all wiped off, I went ahead and just covered the whole top of the piece. And then I used my shop rags and I wiped it off. This glaze is so easy to work with. It accentuates that grain and just gives it more dimension and a little bit more warmth and color. So I'm pretty happy with it. I'm gonna let that dry and then add some more sealer to the top of it. And now I'm finally happy with the top. So now I'm taping up the insides of the doors. So when you open the door, this is all gonna need to be taped up so that when I spray, I don't get any overspray of paint on the inside of my cabinets, because I do like to paint the back of the cabinet door. And so I want color there, and that's why I'm going to be opening this door and closing it while I'm working on it when I'm spraying it, so that I can have color on both sides of my door. Just a personal preference. You'll see me opening and closing my door while I'm doing this. I'm checking to make sure that I cannot see that green tape through the edges of the door. If I can, that means you're going to see places that are not painted, and I would need to change my tape or move my tape, but thankfully it works. So now I'm using my Kilz Restoration Primer. It's a water-based primer, and I love to use primer to promote adhesion, to block any stains or bleed through, and to just give my paint that's going on the next coat a good surface to stick to. It also smooths out those differences in some of the finish, and it makes your paint job that you're putting on top of this primer last longer. I will always prime my pieces. I know some people don't, and that's a personal preference, and that's fine. Everybody has their own ideas of how they want to do things, but this is the way I do it. Surf Prep has these great rad pads, and this is a very high grit, thin sponge that I'm just going over after everything dries. This is the next morning. I'm going over everything and just sanding away any little imperfections, wiping it down. All that dust is gone, and then I can paint. Well, or can I? Not really, because when you prime, you finally see little pieces of dings and dents and little cracks and things that you need to fix before you put on your final coat. So this kind of just makes it lighter and helps you to see those things. So I'm using my DAP Premium Wood Filler and I'm filling in little dings and dents. I'll sand that clean and wipe it down again. And now I'm ready to paint. I'm using my Wise Owl 1 Hour Enamel in Safari Jacket. This is a khaki colored paint. It looks kind of beige. Sometimes it looks like it has green undertones, really faint green undertones. It's mostly like a nice khaki beige color. So I'm straining my paint and putting it in my Fuji Q5 Platinum sprayer, and then we'll be ready to go. So here I'm just stirring it up a little bit, and I've decided it's a little tiny bit thicker than I want, so I'm just gonna put like 1 ounce of water into this quart of paint and then mix that up really well, gently. And so it'll be the perfect viscosity for me and my sprayer. You can see here that I've also taped up my top with that same Scotch tape and plastic and then some green frog tape on the sides, and so that I will not get any paint on that beautiful top. Wise Owl 1 Hour Enamel is a water-based paint. It does not require top coat. It is super durable and one of my favorite paints to spray. I have a couple of favorites, and I just love this newer color that's come out. It's from their Wilderness collection, and it is a beautiful khaki color. So my process is normally to spray every part of the piece and then open those doors and drawers and spray those so that I can leave the doors a little bit open as it's drying. So it's a few hours later, I've come back and everything's dry and I'm peeling off this tape. I just love this part. It's so exciting to know that that paint is on there and you're peeling off all of the ugly old plastic and you can see this piece take shape. So now I'm using Wise Owl Furniture Salve in the scent of Lemon Verbena. It's my favorite. This is a salve that you can just apply with one of the Wise Owl palm brushes or a rag. I just use a microfiber cloth here, and it conditions the wood, protects it, and gives it a nice fresh scent. Okay, let's take a look at the before and now the after. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you would like to subscribe to my channel, just click that bell button and the subscribe button down there and you'll get notified when videos come out. I hope to see you soon and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.